He wasn't my father's son. He was hers. 26 years. One secret. One DNA test. The email came at 2:47 in the morning. Not a notification. Not a newsletter. A direct message from someone named Daniel Hartley. And the subject line read, "I think you're my brother." I stared at my phone in the dark. My girlfriend was asleep next to me. The fan was running. Everything was normal except for the 5 words on my screen that were quietly dismantling everything. I thought I knew about my family. I didn't open it right away. That was the first mistake. I set the phone down, stared at the ceiling, and told myself it was probably a scam, some genealogy grift, some lonely person fishing for a connection that didn't exist. I'd done the 23andMe kit 6 months ago on a whim, after my cousin did it, and found out she was 12% Ashkenazi Jewish, which sent her spiraling for 3 weeks. I did it for something to talk about at Thanksgiving. I found out I have elevated genetic risk for restless leg syndrome and that I'm 68% Northern European. Nothing interesting. Nothing that mattered. Until 2:47 a.m., when everything mattered all at once. I picked the phone back up. I opened the app. I went to DNA relatives first, because I needed to see it for myself before I read a single word he'd written. There he was. Daniel Hartley. Predicted relationship. Half-sibling. Shared DNA. 49.3%. 49.3. I got out of bed. I went to the kitchen. I sat down at the table in the dark, without turning on a single light, because something about the darkness felt necessary, like the room needed to match what was happening inside my chest. Half-sibling means one parent in common. My parents had been married for 31 years. My father was the kind of man who coached Little League even after I quit, who called my mother every time he was running more than 10 minutes late, who teared up at my college graduation and said, "Everything I've ever done has been for you and your sister." My father, who apparently had a son somewhere that none of us knew about. Or my mother. The thought arrived quietly and then sat down in the room like it owned the place. It could be either of them. I opened Daniel's message. "Hey, I know this is probably a shock, and I'm sorry for the hour. I just couldn't wait anymore. I've been sitting on this for 3 weeks. My name is Daniel. I'm 26. I live in Cincinnati. I was adopted at birth and I've been searching for biological family since I was 19. I don't want to disrupt your life or cause any problems. I just want to know where I come from. Even if that's all this ever is. Just this conversation, that's enough. I hope." I read it 4 times. Then I did something I've never done before. I went to the living room, opened my laptop, and typed his name into every search engine I could think of. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google. He was real. 26 years old. Profile picture showed a guy sitting on a tailgate, baseball cap, easy smile. The kind of smile that doesn't know yet that the world can take things from you. His LinkedIn said he worked in HVAC installation. His Facebook was mostly public. Bengals fan. Had a dog named Biscuit. Last post was a week ago, a meme about overtime pay. He looked like my father. Not in a vague way. Not in the way you see resemblance because you're looking for it. In the way that punches you in the throat because you weren't ready. The jaw. The ears. The way his eyes sat a little deep in his face. My father's eyes. My father's jaw. My father's son. I sat there until the sun came up. I didn't write back to Daniel. I didn't know what to say. I was too busy running the math. 26 years old meant he was born when I was -3, when my parents were. No. Wait. I was 23. So he was 26. Which meant he was born 3 years before me. 3 years before me. My parents were already together 3 years before I was born. They got married when my mother was 22. Daniel would have been conceived when she was 19. Before the wedding. Maybe before they were even serious. Maybe the whole thing was a secret that got buried before my parents said I do. And it stayed buried for 26 years. And now it had clawed its way back up through a saliva sample and a DNA database, because that's what secrets do eventually. They come back. They always come back. And they do not come back quietly. My girlfriend found me at the kitchen table at 7 in the morning. "Did you sleep?" she asked. No. She could read me like a building permit. She pulled out a chair, sat down, looked at my face, and said, "What happened?" I showed her the app. I showed her Daniel's message. I watched her face move through the same sequence mine had. Confusion, calculation, understanding, and then the slow landing of what this actually meant. "Have you told your parents?" she said. It's 7 in the morning. Have you written back to Daniel? No. What are you waiting for? I didn't have an answer. I was waiting for someone to tell me the right move. I was waiting for a version of this where I could know the truth without blowing up my family's life. I was waiting for a world where you could be 23 years old and have the kind of problem that belongs to much older, much wiser people who have had time to build the emotional architecture for it. You have to write back, she said. He's been waiting 3 weeks. He's a person. She was right. She was always right in the moments that counted. I wrote back, Daniel, I got your message. I'm not going to pretend I'm not shaken because I am. But I'm glad you reached out. I have a lot of questions and I imagine you do too. Can we talk on the phone this week? He responded in 4 minutes. I've been refreshing this app every hour. Yes. Call me anytime. I mean that. Literally anytime. We talked that same night. 2 hours and 40 minutes. I know because I checked. When we hung up and I couldn't believe it had been that long. It felt like 20 minutes and also like an entire lifetime. He was funny. That was the first thing I noticed. Dry, fast, self-deprecating in a way that made you trust him immediately. He told me about his adoptive parents, who he described as good people who did their best, and sometimes their best was pretty good. He told me he'd always known he was adopted. He told me that for most of his life, the not knowing hadn't bothered him the way people assumed it should, until his adoptive father got sick 2 years ago, and he found himself sitting in a hospital and realizing he didn't know his own medical history. And that was the thing that finally made him look. I wasn't looking for a family, he said. I was looking for a reason. To tell a doctor if heart disease runs in my blood. Does it? I asked. I don't know yet. That's why I'm talking to you. I told him what I knew. My father's father had died of a heart attack at 64. My mother's side was mostly cancer, breast, and colon. A few generations back, I told him our family had the kind of medical history that nobody wrote down because they assumed everyone already knew it. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, Do you know which parent we share? Not yet, I said. I haven't talked to them. Another silence. Longer this time. Are you going to? He asked. I don't know how. Yeah, he said. I know that feeling. The next 3 days were the longest 3 days of my life. And I have taken a 22-hour flight to Southeast Asia with a middle seat and no sleep. I went to work. I answered emails. I ate food and slept and functioned. And underneath all of it, the whole time, this thing was running constantly, like a program I couldn't close. A background process eating all my memory. Which parent? Which parent? Which parent? My father called me on Wednesday to ask if I was coming home for his birthday dinner that weekend. Normal call. Maybe 6 minutes. He told me my Aunt Karen was coming, which he complained about because my Aunt Karen always brought her emotional support dog to dinners, and the dog had chewed through 2 of his throw pillows last Christmas. He laughed at his own complaints. He said, Love you, bud, before he hung up. He had no idea. Or maybe he did. Maybe he had known for 26 years. Maybe he thought the secret had died. Maybe he had spent every year since then believing he'd gotten away with it. That whatever happened before he became the father I knew was sealed and gone and safe. Saturday came. I drove to my parents' house. I had not decided what I was going to do. I had not made a plan. My girlfriend told me before I left, You don't have to tell them tonight. You don't owe anyone a timeline. She was right. She was right. And I drove the whole way there knowing she was right and also knowing that I was going to tell them anyway, because I am not built for carrying things like this. Because the weight of it had already changed. The way I was looking at my father's face when I imagined seeing him. And a person cannot sit at a birthday dinner and eat cake and smile while wondering if the man across the table has a secret son. My mother hugged me at the door. She smelled like the same lotion she'd used my entire life. She said I looked tired. I said I was fine. My father was in the backyard with Aunt Karen, laughing about the dog. We had dinner. Aunt Karen was exactly as much as she always was. The food was good. My sister was there with her husband and their toddler, who is 2 and currently committed to the project of touching every surface in every room at all times. It was a normal family dinner. It was warm and familiar and full of the specific chaos that belongs only to a house that has loved people in it for decades. And I sat in the middle of all of it with a secret folded under my ribs. After dinner, After cake, after my sister left and Aunt Karen and her dog departed and my father was watching the end of a baseball game, I helped my mother clean up the kitchen. It was just the two of us. She was rinsing dishes. I was loading the dishwasher. The television was on in the other room. Everything was the same as it had always been. Mom, I said. I did that 23andMe thing. A few months ago. She kept rinsing. I know, you mentioned it. Anything interesting? Yeah, I said. Actually, yeah. I got a message. From someone named Daniel Hartley. He's 26. He was adopted. The rinsing stopped. Not immediately. It stopped like a car that rolls. A little after you've taken your foot off the gas. It stopped slowly. And then it stopped completely. And my mother set the dish down in the sink and put both hands on the counter. And she did not turn around. She did not turn around. And in that moment, before a single word was said, I had my answer. Mom. She turned around. Her face was doing something I had never seen it do before. Not crying. Not angry. Something older than both of those things. Something that looked like a person who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has just realized they've reached the top of the hill and they cannot keep going. How did he find you? She whispered. DNA database. She closed her eyes. Does Dad know? I asked. She shook her head. Barely. But it was a no. Mom. Does Dad know he has a son? He is not your father's son. Her voice was barely there. He is mine. The kitchen was very quiet. I was 19, she said. It was before your father. It was before any of this. I was 19 and I was alone and I could not. She stopped. She pressed her lips together. She started again. I made a choice. The only choice I could make at the time. And I made it. And I have lived with it every single day. And I have never told anyone because there was never a right way to tell it. He's looking for you, I said. She made a sound. Not a word. Something that came from a place in her that was much older than words. He's not looking for drama, I said. He didn't even know you existed until he searched. He just wants to know where he comes from. He just wants his medical history. I know what he wants. Her voice cracked. I have imagined this moment for 26 years. And she looked at me, really looked at me. And I saw something I was not expecting to see. Not guilt, not fear, not even grief, though there was grief in it. Relief. There was relief in her face. Like a door had finally opened that she'd spent her whole life pressing her weight against. I have to tell your father, she said. Yes, I said. You do. Tonight. I looked toward the living room. My father was watching baseball. He was 61 years old. He had built his entire life around this family. That's not my call, I said. But soon. She nodded. She turned back to the sink. She turned the water back on. Does he seem like a good person? She asked. Daniel. Yeah, I said. He does. He has a dog named Biscuit. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. The kind that lies right next to crying. My father told the story later. Not that night, but 2 weeks later, after my mother had told him everything. After there were several days of silence, and at least one night where my sister called me and said, "What is happening in this house?" And I had to decide what to say. I told her to call Mom. She did. And then there were several more days of silence. My father called me when it was over. When he and my mother had found something on the other side of the conversation that wasn't collapse. I'm not going to pretend it was easy, he said. It wasn't. But it was before me. It was before she and I were even serious. And she was 19 and alone, and she made the only choice she could see. He paused. I'm not in a position to judge that. Are you okay? I asked. I'm working on it, he said. That's the honest answer. Daniel and my mother spoke for the first time on a Sunday afternoon in April. I know because she called me afterward and I could hear it in her voice immediately, that the weight was still there, but the shape of it had changed. He sounds like me, she said. He talks like me. He's funny, I said. He is funny. She sounded startled by it, like she'd expected someone different and found someone familiar. He wants to meet. What did you say? I said yes. A breath. Of course I said yes. They met in Columbus, halfway between both of them, on a Wednesday in May. I wasn't there. That was their meeting. That belonged to them. She called me that evening. She didn't say much. She said it was the strangest and most important day of her life. She said he had her father's hands. She said she cried, and he was kind about it. And they sat in a restaurant for 3 hours, and she found out he was allergic to shellfish and had played varsity baseball in high school and had once broken his arm falling out of a tree at age 10, And none of it was the kind of information that mattered, and all of it was the most important information she had ever learned. I left someone in the world, she said, and the world took care of him. And now he's here. I met Daniel in August. A Saturday. We got lunch. We talked for 5 hours. We had the same opinion about whether Chicago-style deep dish actually counts as pizza, which is that it does not. It is a casserole, and anyone who argues otherwise is living a lie. We agreed on almost everything in that weird, specific way that suggests something older than experience. Something in the code. He's my brother. That's the only way to say it, and the sentence still doesn't fit right in my mouth. Doesn't sit right in my chest. Because there is no version of the word that was made for what we are to each other. Two people who came from the same place and were raised in completely different worlds and ended up at a lunch table in Columbus, Ohio, arguing about pizza. My parents are still together. They go to therapy now, which they would never have considered before this. And my mother says it's the best thing she has done in 20 years. My father is still working on it. But he's working on it, and that's the honest answer. And I've come to believe that the honest answer is almost always enough. Daniel comes for Thanksgiving this year. My mother asked. He said yes. My sister, who eventually got the full story, has already texted him twice and sent him a recommendation for a show she thinks he'll like. My father has agreed to try. I think about the night I got the email a lot. 2:47 in the morning. The darkness of my kitchen. The weight of not knowing whose life was about to change. It changed all of our lives. It had to. Because here is the thing nobody tells you about secrets. They don't protect anyone. They just delay the protection. They put off the reckoning until the reckoning has gathered enough mass to crack the floor when it lands. My mother made a painful choice at 19. She made it alone, scared, with no resources and no support and no version of the future she could clearly see. She gave a child a life she couldn't give him. She did what she could. And then she locked the door and threw away the key and spent 26 years pretending the door didn't exist. Daniel spent 26 years on the other side of it. Not angry, not bitter, just searching for a reason to tell his doctor whether heart disease ran in his blood. So here is the question I'm leaving with you. Not about my mother, not about my father, about yourself. If you had a secret that had caused no visible harm in 26 years, a secret that everyone involved had survived, that had not broken anyone, that was buried deep enough that you could live an entire good life on top of it, would you still have the obligation to tell it? And if the secret was not yours alone? If telling it could shatter someone you love? At what point does protecting someone from the truth become taking something from them that was never yours to take? I don't have the answer, but Daniel does. And so does my mother. And they're both coming to Thanksgiving.